The wind howled like a dying beast as it swept across the red plains, carrying with it the dry taste of dust and the faint metallic tang of blood. A storm was brewing, though no one in the town of Red Vulture lifted their heads from the muck of their lives to notice. They had grown used to storms, dust storms, gun storms, storms of cruelty. What rattled their bones was not the sky but the sound that split it, a gunshot that tore silence apart like glass under a hammer. Ezekiel Kane stood in the street with his revolver hanging low at his side, the barrel smoking faintly. His hat brim shadowed his scarred face, his eyes two dim lanterns burning with something between fury and weariness. People scattered from the saloon porch where a card game had erupted into violence. A man lay bleeding in the dust, and Kane neither flinched nor shifted. He hadn't meant to kill him, truth be told, he hadn't meant much of anything these past years. Fate just kept dragging him forward, pulling his trigger when his own hands refused to care. He had once been a soldier, blue coat and brass buttons, marching for a cause that seemed noble until the bodies piled higher than the ideals. The war had left him with scars the whiskey couldn't drown and a silence that followed him into every saloon, every rented bed, every dawn he wished hadn't come. Worse than war had been the letter that found him after, his wife gone, his son gone, butchered in a frontier raid while he was off fighting strangers. She had left him words scrawled in haste, urging him not to chase vengeance but to find peace. Words he folded into his breast pocket and never read again, though he felt their weight like a bullet pressed against his heart. In Red Vulture, peace was a joke whispered between graves. He felt it the moment he arrived, eyes watching him from broken windows, fear sewn into every face, as if the earth itself bent to the will of one man. That man showed his hand on Kane's second evening. The townsfolk were dragged to the gallows square by the sheriff's men, rifles glinting in the sun. A boy, no older than 18, was shoved forward. His hands were tied, his face smeared with dirt and defiance. The charge was theft, a loaf of bread from the mercantile. Starvation had drawn him to crime, but mercy had no place here. Sheriff Malcolm Crowe presided with the cold assurance of a man who believed himself judge and executioner both. He wore black like a preacher, though his eyes burned not with faith but with greed. His voice carried easily, cutting through the gasps of the crowd, "A thief steals the sweat of honest men. And in my town, a thief pays with his neck." Kane felt the words like a hot brand pressed to his skin. The boy's face shimmered in his vision, flickering into his own son's, same wild spark, same half-grown jaw. The noose slipped over the boy's head, the rope creaked, and the trapdoor fell. The crowd gasped once, then fell silent. Kane's jaw clenched until he thought his teeth might break. Crowe's gaze found him across the square, a slow, cruel smile tugging at the sheriff's mouth as if he could read Kane's thoughts. Kane dropped his eyes, turned, and walked away before his hands betrayed him. That night, he decided he would leave. The town was rotten, and he was no savior. He wanted no more blood on his conscience, no more ghosts. But fate had other ideas. In the narrow alley behind the saloon, shadows peeled themselves from the walls. Crowe's men, 3 of them, faces hard and eyes gleaming with cruel anticipation, stepped into his path. "Sheriff, don't take kindly to stares," one said, a knife flashing in the moonlight. Another cracked his knuckles, eager for the sport. Kane reached for his revolver, but a boot caught his wrist, slamming him against the wall. Fists rained down like stones, each blow punctuated with laughter. He fought back, hard, landing 2, 3 strikes, bone meeting flesh with sickening thuds. A knife scraped across his ribs. Blood seeped into his shirt. He managed a shot. One man dropped, clutching his chest, but the others pressed him harder. His vision swam, the world spinning in dizzy bursts of pain, until he staggered into the dirt, choking on dust and iron. They left him there, broken, bleeding, a message carved in bruises and cuts. Crowe owned Red Vulture, and strangers had no place in it. When he woke, the stars wheeled above him, cold and indifferent. A face bent over his, sharp eyes glinting in the starlight. A woman, her dark hair tied back with a strip of red cloth, her voice steady yet laced with fire. She pressed a rag to his wound, whispering, "Lie still. They'll be back." Her name was Isabella Vega. Half Comanche, half Mexican, outlaw by blood and by necessity. She carried herself with the weight of old grief, but her gaze did not falter. She told him the truth of Sheriff Crowe, not just a tyrant but a trafficker of flesh, a man who sold settlers and natives alike across the border, feeding his wealth with chains. Her sister had vanished into that darkness years before, taken by Crowe's men. Kane tried to push himself up, muttering he wanted no part of this. She caught his arm, her grip fierce. "You saw the boy. You carry that anger. Use it." He turned away, but in the back of his skull, He heard his wife's voice from the letter, echoing through memory, "Find peace, not revenge." What was peace to a man who had lost everything? Perhaps it was something you built for others, when you could not build it for yourself. Isabella's eyes searched him, reading the storm in his silence. "One last fight," she said. "Help me take him down, and then you can vanish back into your ghosts." The desert wind hissed like a warning, but Kane felt the old rhythm stir in his bones. The soldier's march, the gunslinger's aim, the man he had buried under whiskey and regret. So he nodded once, a pact forged not in words but in the heavy silence between them. Together they struck when the moon hid behind clouds. A caravan of wagons rattled across the desert, cages rattling with the cries of captives. Isabella's rifle cracked first, splitting the night. Kane followed, revolver in hand, each shot precise, each movement honed by years of violence he thought he had left behind. Horses screamed, men fell, torches spilled into the sand. They freed the captives, breaking chains with bloody hands. Kane felt a pulse of something he hadn't in years, purpose, savage and sharp. But the moment he thought they might win, the ground trembled with new hoofbeats. Lanterns glowed like demon eyes in the dark. Crowe rode at the head of his men, his smile white against the blackness. He raised his rifle and pointed it at Kane, his voice rolling like thunder, "Welcome to my hell, soldier." Ropes snapped across the night. Kane and Isabella were dragged down, beaten, bound in iron. The freed captives scattered, screams swallowed by the desert wind. At dawn, as the sun clawed its way over the horizon, the town of Red Vulture stirred to see its newest prisoners dragged through the dust. Crowe sat tall in his saddle, Kane and Isabella chained at his horse's hooves. The sheriff's smile was slow and poisonous, as if he had been waiting his whole life for this. And Kane, blooded but unbroken, lifted his head and met his eyes. In that moment, he understood, the devil of the West had finally noticed him, and there would be no turning back. Dawn broke over Silver Rock, not with songbirds or stillness, but with the pounding of hooves. Dust rolled in like a storm, and through it came Kane's riders, faces masked with bandanas, rifles gleaming in the early light, torches raised high. They descended on the settlement like wolves on a lamb, their shouts cutting through the quiet morning. Doors splintered. Flames leapt from rooftops. Screams tore the air wide open. At the edge of town, Sartana stood, watching the inferno unfold. His revolver rested heavy at his hip, his rifle slung across his back, his eyes narrowed against the rising smoke. He could have slipped away into the desert, left the town to its fate. That was the man he had become, death without allegiance, vengeance without mercy. But the memory of Maria's frightened eyes, the echo of his boy's laughter, rooted him in the dust. He drew his rifle. He stepped forward. The first shot split a rider clean from his saddle, the second shattered a torch before it could kiss dry wood. Panic spread through Kane's men as the angel of death revealed himself in their path. Gunfire answered, hot lead cutting the air, but Sartana moved with purpose, rolling into cover, firing sharp bursts that rang with finality. Settlers, once paralyzed with fear, rallied to his defiance. Maria ran among them, pressing rifles into desperate hands, her voice rising above the chaos, urging them to fight for the ground beneath their feet. The street became a battlefield. Smoke clung to the air, mixing with the acrid sting of gunpowder. A barn erupted in flames, sending sparks into the sky. Sartana fought without pause, his coat torn, his arm grazed, yet his aim never faltered. Each pull of the trigger was steady, each strike of his knife calculated. And then the world narrowed to a single boy, a child no older than his son had been, caught in the crossfire, stumbling, eyes wide with terror. Sartana leapt forward, dragging him from the path of a bullet, but too late. The child gasped once, then went still in his arms. The memory of his own boy's final cry surged like fire through Sartana's chest. He laid the child down gently, almost reverently, before rising to his feet with fury burning in his veins. His shots grew sharper, faster, fueled not by cold calculation but by raw grief. Kane's riders began to falter. The settlers, emboldened, pushed forward with hoes, shotguns, and sheer desperation. When the dust cleared, the attackers lay scattered, their survivors retreating into the horizon with fear gnawing at their heels. But Sartana knew this was no victory. It was only the opening act of Kane's vengeance. Blood stained the dirt road. Families wept over the fallen. Silver Rock had defended itself, but the cost was carved deep in every face. And Sartana, though he had saved them, felt the weight of their loss as though it were his own. Kane would not forgive this humiliation. He would come harder, meaner, hungrier, which meant Sartana had only one choice, to finish this war at its root. Devil's Bluff lay jagged and cruel beneath a sky that promised no mercy. It was there Kane had chosen his ground, a canyon of shadows where the rocks themselves seemed eager to drink blood. Sartana approached on foot, each step deliberate, each breath a measured calm before the storm. The vultures wheeled above, sensing the feast to come. Gunfire cracked as Kane's men revealed themselves from the ridges. Sartana dove behind stone, returning fire with the precision of a man who no longer cared for survival. Bullets whined off rock. Dust sprayed. He crawled, rolled, pressed himself into shadows, striking from angles his enemies never anticipated. One by one they fell, their bodies tumbling down the canyon walls. Yet Sartana was not untouched. Blood seeped from his side where lead had found him, but pain was a whisper against the roar of his will. At last, only Kane remained. He stepped from the shadows, dressed in silk and smugness, a revolver gleaming at his side. His smile was not born of courage but arrogance, sharpened by years of power unchecked. He mocked the man before him. "You think death makes you holy? You're just another killer, Antonio. Another ghost in the dirt." The name struck like a lash, a reminder of the man buried beneath grief. But Sartana did not flinch. He squared his shoulders, hands loose by his side, eyes locked on his enemy. The canyon fell silent, save for the wind whispering across the stone. Fingers twitched. Breath stilled. Two shots thundered almost as one. The echoes rolled down the canyon, chased by the cries of circling birds. When the smoke cleared, Kane staggered, clutching his chest, disbelief carved into his face. He fell to the dust, eyes glassing over, the weight of his empire collapsing with him. Sartana stood, blooded but unbroken, his revolver still smoking. "No," he rasped, voice low but steady. "I'm not another killer. I'm justice." The settlers of Silver Rock celebrated their salvation with trembling relief, yet Sartana did not join them. He lingered at the edge of their joy, shadowed by the fire in his past. Maria approached, her voice soft, her hand reaching for his. She asked him to stay, to help rebuild, to carve a new life from the ashes. For a moment, he wanted to. For a moment, he saw himself in her eyes, not as Sartana the angel of death but as Antonio, the man who once laughed, once loved. But the moment passed. He pulled away gently, a ghost refusing the warmth of the living. The town would heal without him. He could not. He mounted his horse, the setting sun framing him as a silhouette against the sky. Behind him, the settlers cheered, their laughter strained but real. A drunk shouted, half in fear, half in jest, "There goes the angel of death. Somebody lock up the whiskey before he kills that too." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd, a fragile balm over their wounds. Sartana rode on, the desert swallowing him whole, his figure shrinking against the horizon. He carried no gold, no glory, only the silence of a man who had found vengeance but not peace. The hoofbeats faded, yet the legend remained, whispered in saloons and around campfires, a tale of the angel of death who came and vanished like smoke. And though his story closed here, the question lingered like a shadow. Had Sartana destroyed his demons, or merely fed them enough to ride another day?